Okay,
Uh,
I think we're going now, so we can just ease into it, and obviously, but we can cut it from where we need to or whatever.
Sounds good.
Maybe I'd like to just take a second, Jator, and just like arrive in the room with you, because this is actually like a really special culmination of a lot of things for me to sit here with you today. I'm actually getting quite emotional. It means an awful lot to me. So I just want to take this in. You're someone I look up to a massive amount. So I'm absolutely honored that you would take the time to share this space with me today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, man. I get to know you now, and I'm honored to be here. Lucky to be here, and based on my experience of you so far and your work, I mean, I get a huge honor getting to meet young men like you on the planet, and that warms my heart, warms me up.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jator. So I thought maybe a nice place to start, Jator, is just to maybe give people like a little snapshot. Obviously, we've got some time to talk, so we will investigate deeper, but just maybe to give people an idea of the work you do now, what that looks like, and maybe some of the theories or some of the fields that inform the work you do.
Yeah. Let's see. The work that I do now, I guess you would describe it as, well, I worked with a client yesterday, first time we worked together, and he described the work as a lot of what he does on his own is kind of sifting through the leaves, right? And he finds himself sifting through the leaves, and he's quite intelligent. And he noticed that as he's sifting through his own leaves, his own stories, etc., they're kind of these repetitive things. And he typically finds very linear and logical answers. But he said that his experience of my work and our time together is more like sifting through those leaves, but then taking those leaves up and looking like what's underneath those leaves, and what's kind of the driving force to why those leaves congealed or came together or synergized in the way that they did. And I think over the years, I've either cultivated a skill, or it's always been a gift I've had, or a combination of both, of really being skilled and able to hear what's underneath people's leaves. So they come in and they're talking about what's going on in their life, but I've found a skill of understanding what's underneath the leaves, and I have a gift of being able to take the story that's underneath there, the grime, the soot, the dirt, the scary stuff, and I have a skill of being able to present that in a way that isn't more shaming and more causative of grime and soot and guilt and worms and all the shit you might imagine when you lift up a pile of leaves. And I guess that skill's just grown over the years, and what's informed that is in my time at university studying what did I study in university now? Kinesiology. And then my time at the Czech Institute, of course, my friendship with J.P. Sears, highly informative of that. And then my friendship with our mutual mentor, John McMullen, highly informative of what's underneath those leaves. And in my own journey, of doing this type of work, starting off more in the physical and eventually getting to this kind of mental and emotional searching. I ran into things that weren't addressed with nutrition, weren't addressed with what I also learned at the Kresser Institute was my friendship with Chris Kresser, with functional medicine, weren't addressed with lifestyle factors. There were things that were still getting in clients' ways. And I'm a very curious person, and I wanted to explore that. What is that? What is that that gets in our way that's often beyond the downstream expressions? For me, the downstream expressions being how we live and choose to live, and etc. So if I was to sum it up in short, I think that's probably it.
Yeah. So from what I understood, your analogy or your client's analogy of the leaves, like you were saying, is the downstream expression or the manifestation of some deeper driving cause of this grime, this soot, energetic blockages, I suppose, in the emotional body, however you want to see it. And yeah, I think it's beautiful. In my own evolution, I'm still 26 years old. I'm still a very young man in that way. But I think in the last couple of years, I think that's become just wholly apparent to me that, like you said, you can take in someone and you can assess them on all of these different parameters, physical, even mental, emotional, but like you have to go deeper to the root cause as well. And I think that's what you were sharing. And that's mostly, it sounds to me like what your work is concerned with. It's kind of, and I love this kind of attitude of curiosity that you bring, because it has to be light, it has to be playful, because those parts of ourselves that are trapped up in these, it's a traumatic holding. It needs that lightness and it needs that curiosity, and I think that's just such a beautiful part of the puzzle of this holistic approach to working with people. So yeah, that's really beautiful, Jator.
Yeah, agreed, brother. You mentioned that you're 26. I think around that same time, I think I was 24. I went to my first Vipassana sit. It was a 10-day sit. And when I returned from that, I was obese as a kid. And when I returned from that, I had this idea of getting extremely lean. And that's, I think, what actually informed this transformation of chasing other aspects. Is I got very lean, and on my way to go get underwater weight or hydrostatic weighing, I remember being in the car and I was praying to something, and my prayer was, please don't let me be under 10% body fat. And the reason why I was praying for that is because I knew kind of logically that if I was under 10% body fat, that there wasn't much more room for me to get leaner. Like, that's quite lean. And that if I was under 10% body fat, it was also then a signpost, because what I was still seeing in the mirror, I wasn't satisfied with. I still thought I was fat, or I still experienced myself as fat. So I go and do this hydrostatic weighing, and the results come back, and I'm, I think it was 4.7% body fat. And, in my mind, I thought there might be a part of me that celebrated that, which was the exact opposite. I went to my car and I cried for about an hour. And I was crying because it was such a powerful realization that what I see in the mirror literally has zero to do with what's in the mirror, and has everything to do with how I'm experiencing myself and what I'm making that mean, and then creating that picture that I see in the mirror. And that was really, at least in hindsight, probably one of the most informative moments of this looking somewhere else. I thought, okay, something is going on here beneath this, my own leaves. And let me start exploring that.
Oh, that's powerful. I think there are those, it's moments really, I think, where we get the clarity. You know, when we talk about doing inner work and everything like that, it's not like in the gym where you can consistently kind of push and you can see your muscles grow all the time. You know, I think Russell Brand actually shared a really beautiful analogy just recently. It's like a spiral. It's cyclical in its nature, but if you're doing the right work, you'll go a little bit deeper each time, and hopefully then you can unpack that, you know. And I think we just have to, you know, practice that awareness, so when that moment comes, we can try and take in the full meaning of that lesson, you know. And for you, I guess what you're sharing is that your experience of yourself was not lining up with maybe how you felt. I don't know, when it comes in terms of body fat and how we present to the world. I think I've had this in many ways. I've tried to build myself big and strong so that I can be respected, you know, so that I can command attention. I want to be cared about, you know, at a deep level, you know. And I don't know, that's from my personal experience. I don't know, maybe what did that look like for you in that moment, Jator? You know, you said you had this absolute release, you know, you were crying for an hour in a car. That's not like a trivial moment. That's some deep learning there.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in the language I would use today, I think what I learned in that moment was that I use my body or my body image. I use it as an easy place to punish myself. And I think many of us do, and in different form and different fashion, whether you hate your body or you're in love with your body. Both sides of that coin can become pretty dangerous paths to go down. And what I find fascinating is by looking in a mirror, literally looking in a mirror and looking at your body, noticing the parts of your body that you project perfection onto, or the parts of your body that you project disgust onto. What I learned or have learned over the years is that's actually, from my perspective, safe places for us to project these unhealed parts of self onto our body, because it's almost one of the most beautiful places to hide, because it's hiding in plain sight. And when we hide things in plain sight, we often don't look there. We look for the more complex area. It couldn't just be in the mirror. It couldn't be when I look at my chest and I have disgust for what my chest looks like. That couldn't be an unhealed or traumatized part of me that I'm actually projecting onto my body, and I'm making a deflective story. It's about my body, but that's the most beautiful place to hide, because it's right there. I won't look any deeper. But underneath that is, okay, well, what does my chest represent to me? What's underneath that? What don't I want to see? What are the emotions that come up when I'm attacking myself or judging myself or criticizing myself? Another question that people rarely ask, at least in my experience, is, how do I benefit from causing myself pain? So many people will say, well, I'm looking in the mirror, I feel self-criticism, I feel judgment, and I want to change that. And, a lot of the work that I've done and do with my clients, and a lot of the work I do with myself, is, yes, that may be true. There's a part of me that wants to change that. the other truth for me is there's a part of me that somehow benefits from that story. And those benefits can be many, and often it's familiarity. It's the benefit of the emotions that I get from having the experience. So repeating the experience to capture those same emotional trains that are expressive of how I think I should feel about myself. And so, over the years, I've just found that our body in one way or another is a very easy place for us to hide our deepest wounds, to project our deepest wounds onto, and make it a story about the body, make it a story about something else, to protect us from the real pain that's underneath that story, or what's underneath those leaves. The leaves seem painful, but what's underneath that is even more painful. So I think that's kind of what I learned over the years about that moment, and what I continue to learn.
I'm just putting this on silent, Jator.
Yeah, no problem.
No, this is that. Yeah. A lot of things came up for me when you were sharing just the whole, the whole picture. Yeah, I think, how do I want to express this? I think because this is the physical aspect of our being. And there's something that I find as well. There's actually, if we're talking about trauma, which I guess we are essentially, I find it's my word would be, I'd find it cheeky. It's almost cheeky because it's playful, and it kind of wants to bring you down ways, and it wants to give you signals or signs that you can choose to ignore if you want. My own experience, I've been an athlete since I was 10 years old. I trained 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day as a very young teenager because I needed gratification, because I needed respect. My father was absent as when I was a young man, and he was a professional football player, soccer player, I suppose you would understand that as. And I think the way that I interpreted this as a child, or subconsciously, obviously I'm not tiny little child, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew something deep in me was looking for his approval. So I said, if I can become the best in sport, surely that will bring his love to me, his attention, because I carried that wound, and I still do. I'm these days I'm trying to repair that relationship with my father, and it's deep meaningful work for me, and it has helped to shift some of the physical symptoms that I was experiencing, let's say. But just even, the body as a vehicle of storage, this is where we live, this is our vessel, and like you say, I think this is, and I love psychotherapy. I love investigating what's happening in the mind. I think if you're ignoring what's presenting in the body, you're missing some of the easiest things to diagnose, and there's threads you can pull if you're trained that I think you'll spend a longer time trying to get there. Almost. Look, I'm not trying. I just think, there has to be a union in the understanding. And I think this is, the power of what you're doing as well, Jator. You're informed in that way. And I know you're a high level Czech practitioner. You're on the Czech faculty. You know your shit when it comes to what's presenting physically and what that means on a deeper level. And I think that gives you such scope to work with people, and you can come in. You can, I'm in my early days of training in this way, but like I said, I've had a long history of interaction with my body and projecting things onto my body and using it as a vehicle for all of these different unacknowledged needs, I suppose. You know, that's how I was existing in the world through my body, was through these unacknowledged needs. And I think probably yourself, you see someone walk in the door, Jator, within 30 or 40 seconds, or maybe you do a movement assessment, you can see where their blockages are, you can see where they're storing tension, you can see where they have a proneness to collapse. And then what that gives you as a holistic health practitioner and as a coach, as someone that makes space, that's massive scope for that deep inner work.
Well said.
But yeah, no, and look, it excites me to no end, because, you know, just in my own journey, massive healing in the sense of a greater feeling of freedom in my body, in my emotional body, in my mind, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. We're from the same choir, apparently. And I think what's interesting to me about also what you shared is it's true. And over the years, I've cultivated a skill of being able to look at, let's say, someone's physical body and have pretty good guesses as to what might be going on mentally and emotionally, for sure. What I found more exciting for me now is maybe even more expressive than that, more or less, probably about balance, but people's language. I can usually, with clients, I was sharing this with somebody who wants to be a coach, and I was sharing that it's very easy to be a coach. It's very easy to be a mental and emotional explorative coach if you learn how to hear all of the subtle ways people shame, fear, and guilt themselves in their sentence structure. And what I've noticed over the years working with clients is within a first sentence, I already have a lot of hits as to what's going on, because the illusion I think that many human beings have is that we can actually lie. I don't think human beings can. I think we attempt to. But if you're really skilled at watching body language, listening to inflection of voice, watching where the eyes go when they're breathing, when they're not breathing, and to their word usage, the amount of tools that you have as a detective, people, friends of mine get nervous talking to me because they think I'm always watching what they're saying. And I mean, it happens automatically, but I'm not in that same space of kind of like investigating and asking questions.
Yeah.
But as an example, a very subtle thing that many people do that I notice in lots of coaching sessions is if we're just starting to explore their experience of themselves, let's say with a parent in a certain situation, and they'll start to tap into some of the emotions that they have at that time. Often people will start to tap into that emotion, and within seconds, they'll start to rationalize what happened. And then what's interesting in a lot of the, in quote, spiritual community is that my experience of a lot of those people is they'll immediately then go to forgiving their parents, or everything is as it should be, or finding the silver lining. And maybe that's a place for us to aspire to in truth and authenticity. But to just speak those words, but not process all of the pain and shame and blame and etc. that's underneath there, it's fascinating to me how afraid we are to allow ourselves to have those feelings, to blame, to get angry, to be very human, to let that process so that we can integrate that and then eventually get to a place of understanding. But from my perspective, that takes time. It's not something that we just say. So many of us say so many things, but beneath that, or the energy beneath that isn't fully here. It's all here. Well, I heard somewhere that to be more spiritual means I'm more forgiving and understanding of everything that happened to me, which may or may not be true. And there's also the participant that we have inside of us that's had a lot of painful experiences that have gone numbed out. And many of us who felt abandoned or felt traumatized or had those experiences and were afraid to lose the attention from a parent, mother, father, a coach, etc., and started to contort ourselves and hide. An adult expression of that could be spirituality.
I think that it's actually really interesting because there is writing in the literature in psychotherapy of like a coping style in terms of how we relate to ourselves and the world to cope with trauma. Look, that's I don't want to keep saying that word, but people need to realize that's at the root of your behavior. Do you know what I mean? So is that over spiritualization? Because there's this middle ground. Let's say we have, like you're saying, so you can either acknowledge or you can deny and justify. And there's a middle ground then. And if you choose to deny and justify, you can skip the middle ground of actually going through the grime, going through the original implicit memory, and with that is investigating the inner child. Fucking really tough work to do. And you can immediately then jump to, oh, I accept everything. I forgive. And it's like that in itself, that's like, yeah, you're skipping a step in the line, because of course that's where we would all like to be, because that's a less burdened place to be in terms of how we understand our story and the different players in that story. But there's the work in between that I think is the life's work. And I think if you skip that, you do yourself a disservice. And my experience of what I've been digging into with listening to everything I can find that you've shared, Jator, because I've been doing a deep dive and it's been amazing, and it's come in at exactly what I experienced as the right time in my evolution, just as a human being and as a coach and everything, is that you have a responsibility. Look, you can choose whether you want to shirk a responsibility or whether you want to yoke it onto your back and say, I'm going to fucking do this. I think if you want the healing, you have to take the burden of the healing as well. And it's going to be painful. But at the end of the road, hopefully you can reach that place, that higher ground where you're actually so strong because you faced up to yourself that this burden that you've been carrying doesn't even feel like a weight anymore. It feels like part of you,
Yeah. I can appreciate that. When I look back through my journey, and I still do this work, and I still get coaching, and I still dive in, over the years, it's perceptually become easier to do. And I think where the real fruits for me have been, in terms of my own experience of life, is the real fruits is I'm much less afraid to have real conversation and to really represent myself, my thoughts, and my perspectives in front of anyone in any situation. And you know, I pull from a lot of my own life experience, and literally this morning I was having a conversation with my partner that was not a conversation I wanted to have for a large part of me, nor was it a conversation I think she wanted to have or hear for a large part of her. And the beauty in that, though, was we're so accustomed and attuned to having those type of conversations, even when we don't want to. The outcome of those conversations are always more connection. Now, that doesn't mean that we stay together or we go apart, like physically. What it does mean is that we get to a place of understanding each other, respecting each other, and feeling the levity of not hiding, not carrying the burden of hiding my truth or hiding my feelings or not being honest or not being upfront or not being this very scared child, actually stepping into being a very mature, playful alpha male. And when a friend of mine who's extremely brilliant intellectually had conversation with me about alpha males once, and she's really into like the history of like animals and evolution, which I didn't know this piece, which I thought was really cool. And I think she used the example of like a silverback gorilla or something, and how the silverback gorilla, although he is an alpha male, he is deeply caring of his whole tribe and deeply also respectful and kind. Does he use his strength and his position to create safety and control and keep his position? Yes, but it's not from this place of shaming and blaming. It's from this place of support, groundedness, respect, and care. And so having these conversations, that's been the biggest fruit for me, is that I don't walk around every day, at least as I can feel, with all of this subconscious burden of things that have gone unsaid. Or I don't hide from my partner my truth about whatever is going on inside of me, so that instead of sharing that truth, I go and act out behaviors to attack her because it's unprocessed, it's hidden, and to keep acting out those behaviors. That's been the biggest relief for me, is that I'm comfortable in having very uncomfortable conversation. I'm comfortable being myself. I'm comfortable. My value isn't to buy you Christmas presents. I'm comfortable to show up without Christmas presents. And not in a good or bad way, but I'm comfortable allowing myself to be me. And I think that's been, as I'm speaking and sharing that with you now, like that, it's such a sense of relief. And in just hearing that conversation that my partner and I had this morning, in the conversation, I was so thankful that I allow myself to have those conversations. I was so thankful that I've reached a place inside of myself that I feel enough respect and courage for myself to really speak my truth, even though I know that truth doesn't want to be heard. And that's extremely beautiful to me, man, because you talked about that weight. So many clients that I know, so many friends, so many family, so many of parts of me in the past, and maybe less so today, carried around the burden of presenting myself the way I think other people want me to present myself. And just shaking that loose is,
yeah.
I will continue to dive and find scary stuff, because it's such a relief, and I have such a great respect. I have so much respect for myself, and I have so much respect for my partner, that I am unwilling to play fucking games.
That's a mic drop moment.
It brings up it brings up lots of emotions for me, because that feels like freedom. That feels like freedom to me.
To me as well. How I'm experiencing that, and my own, my own journey with pretty much exactly what you're sharing. I think we all experience life. We all have a different story and everything. But what you're saying, the way we have to investigate it, if we want to truly lighten our load, I think that's a shared experience, and that's why it's so powerful to sit with someone in conversation and to realize we're fucking all the same. We're all the same. You might be holding tighter here. You might be collapsing there. I might have fucking sprained my ankles 15 times playing basketball. I might collapse in my kind of thoracic spine every once in a while when I've got some inner child wounds going on. What that does to me is different what that does to you. But I think this is so beautiful, because this is the shared humanity is what you're getting at, Jator. And that experience, I think if everyone would try and cultivate that curiosity, and you need that self-compassion as well, I think is a big part of the puzzle. Definitely in my own experience, because like you said, investigating these parts and the stories they have, and what they want to hide because the other can't hear it, or they're not, this is one of my personal stories, let's say, is, look, I don't want to see, I still have a family here, and I don't know who's going to listen to this, so I'm not going to going to go.
Yes. Let's do it.
So yeah, look, I'm going to speak from my experience, because my experience doesn't seek to blame the other.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we all need to understand that. My experience does not undermine your experience. That's how I've interpreted events, And I have found, let's say, with family members in particular, when I try and share my experience, say, of the past, it meets a part of them that doesn't want to acknowledge their shadow, let's say. Because, look, we do things with people. I do things with people, I pull them into games. There's unhealed parts of me that wants them to play this dysfunctional game and wants us to stay on this level. So and like you share as well, trying to just hold the shame and the guilt and all those feelings of just restriction and just like tar, that will get you stuck, and to gently kind of pull that apart and see what's underneath that, that's when we can acknowledge as well. I'm not sure where I was going. I think I was going to maybe talk about some inner child stuff. But because,
were you complete?
No, you should. We'll keep going. I'll jump back in.
Apologies. I thought you were complete, brother. Yeah, I think it's really cool what you brought up, the piece about the experience of when we share our experiences, especially with people that have emotional attachment to us, intimate partners, our parents, our family. I mean, my experience with my own family, my family of origin, it's taken years for my family to find the understanding that when I'm talking about the past, whether it's on a podcast or in person, or we're processing together, that where I'm coming from isn't a place of blame and shame. Where I'm coming from is a place of exploration and wanting to understand myself and my experiences of what occurred. And the stories that I authored in those moments, and those stories that I authored in those moments, from my perspective, my family, friends, people around me are not responsible for. I'm responsible for. So by me exploring it, it helps me then find my feelings, find my stories, find what I created, to process, to integrate, to move, to connect, and then allow myself space to re-author new stories. And my experience of myself in the past and my experience of some people in my life still to this day, their experience of someone else exploring the past, they often feel a sense of guilt and shame about said experience. And not many people know how to say that. Not many people know how to say, Liam, when you're sharing that, I feel a sense of fear and shame and responsibility. And I notice that I want to get defended. And I notice that I don't want to talk about this. And I notice that I want to attack you. I notice that I feel attacked. Very few people know how to speak those type of words.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, for me, another kind of caveat to what we're chatting about too is like deeply learning the skill of knowing who you're talking to, meeting people where they're at, and not from like a excuse me, a hierarchical expression, more so where is their consciousness at, and what are they hearing, and paying very close attention as you even start to open these things up and play there for a while. And over time, you can go play deeper. But if you go immediately into the deepest depths with someone who, one, is doesn't want to go there, two, is uninitiated, three, has literally no idea what fuck you're talking about. And I will own that too. I remember JP and I we've been close friends for, I don't know, somewhere like, I'm 44 now, almost 15 years. And I went to, I think it was JP's first or second class that he ever taught of his own kind of material. And I was attracted to him through the Czech Institute and his work, and it spoke to me. And I remember sitting in that class, 99% of what he was talking about, I didn't know what was going on in that classroom. All I knew was this dude is speaking something that I cannot understand yet. And there's a resonance here that feels I'm attracted to. And I wanna learn more about what he's talking about. It's scary, it's weird. It doesn't make any sense to the construct that I have. And yet I'm attracted to it. And from my perspective, not everyone's attracted to that. And that's okay too.
Yeah. We don't all have to be trauma informed, like self-reflective, exactly right. This is for the people who feel drawn to it. There's a beautiful Rumi quote that goes something like, let yourself be silently drawn to where your desire is taking you, just let it pull you. And if it's not pulling you, you don't need to go there. It's not like, and yeah, I think what you were sharing as well about this coming from a hierarchical kind of standpoint, I think sometimes that is projected as well onto someone who's trying to do the work or something.
Well said.
I think it's deeply challenging for, like you said, people who we have emotional bonds to and we share past history with. I think it's deeply challenging for them to see us try and unearth a little bit, like what happened in those bonds, like, what's that all about? Because obviously there's two sides to this game. It's all relational. So if I'm trying to unpack my stuff and then they're not, there is no good or bad. There's no right or wrong. It is a challenging, it's a challenging process to be witness to, I suppose, or to be passively involved in.
Yeah, I agree. And it also, for me, brings up, I enjoy having a wide spectrum of friends who, not all of my friends are into this. I still have friends that I've had since I was my oldest friendship since I was 7 years old.
That's beautiful.
And I have a group of homies who I've known since around that time, and none of them are into this work.
Yeah.
And they all think I'm crazy. And yet we still hang out and shoot the shit. And I don't hang out with them from the perspective of I'm better than you because I do this. Part of my work with myself around them is to not expect others to be me, is to allow them the space to be them and to enjoy them for who they are. And I still learn lessons from them every time we hang out. And I think that's also another kind of illusion that a lot of us get caught in, that we can only learn these beautiful things from wise people, or who we deem to be wise people. Sometimes I've learned the most wisest things in seemingly the most unwise arenas. And I think that's a beautiful part of life, is we get to continue this learning and experiencing and processing and exploring process. And I think it'd be really boring if I was only hanging out with myself all the time.
Yeah, or just, with people who share, let's say they come from a similar lens. Well, like, I love it as well. And my own partner, she's studying psychotherapy, and she actually kind of spawned my interest. Actually, I say that, but it was actually more confrontational. There was a certain point in time, I remember it very specifically. She took me aside on a walk and she said, Liam, I need more from you. And man, in that moment, I was gut wrenched. I was like, everything in me was fighting that, just her expressing that need. It was, and she all she wanted, I can say this now with joy and with lightness, all she wanted was communication. All she wanted was for me to have just a little bit of kind of emotional fluency, small things, just so our life could be more congruent and we could play a little bit more in that way, because I came from a very, like I shared with you a small bit, a very physical background. That was my arena. It was like I showed up and I identified heavily with the archetype of the warrior. It's like I'll fucking throw down with anyone, and And I still, you know, today as a combat athlete, as someone who practices jiu-jitsu and coaches jiu-jitsu, it's like there's absolutely value in that. But also, guys, you can't go around like a fucking hammerhead shark trying to ram your way through life, do you know? It's going to get you somewhere, but it's probably going to dig you into a hole, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. I think a powerful warrior, from my perspective, has self-control and knows when to use that, and when it's appropriate to use that, and when it's inappropriate to use that, and for that not to be the immediate response in every given situation. And building that emotional vocabulary and inviting ourselves to get intimate with ourselves and allow ourselves to start to actually feel and emote and unnumb again, so that we can get in contact with what's going on inside of us and why we're navigating life like a hammerhead shark. It's funny. I still play ice hockey, and it's quite a combative sport, as I'm sure you're aware. And I've noticed over the years, when people want to fight now, it's such a different experience for me, because I'm just like, really? You really want to fight? Come on, man. And which is so different than how I was when I was younger playing the sport, and what I thought the sport was about, or how I was getting my needs met in the sport. And I think then that, for me, what shines right now is that's a metaphor as well in my life and in my conversation, that it's not always a battle, and I don't need to always be on the defense. It's, instead of coming at everyone and at life like this, it's like trying my best to come at everyone and at life like this. And it's a very different experience for me.
For people that are listening, Jator was just physically representing what is like a protective barrier with his hands, and then what is more of a welcoming kind of, posture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's more enjoyable for me.
And for me too. That's a shared experience. I shared, the metaphor of or just the way of being, of kind of hammering on a little bit. And that's tiresome. Truly is.
Agreed.
Like what that, just even in terms of what that does to your tissues, like your physical body, is very much, it's associated with yin, isn't it? It's that pushing, it's that fire, it's, and we need to learn to be able to welcome in, just to step back, breathe deep, and just welcome in some new experience. We don't have to impose our self all the time.
Yeah. And to run with that metaphor, if we were walking around the street or something, or you and I were in the same room, and I pushed you, not hard, but just pushed you, your body would have to tense up. You'd have to constrict. You would fall right over if you didn't. And so, metaphorically, if we're walking around and pushing everyone with our words, the expectation then and the result is going to be people bracing and fighting back and getting defended. If you want to walk around life in fights everywhere, on every level, I celebrate you. It's not what I want to do. And I won't do it. There's a story I heard at Vipassana The guy that kind of took over Vipassana for the last, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 years, who died a few years ago, S.N. Goenka. Every night you get a video of him giving some lesson and talking about something. And one of his stories was, apparently about the Buddha. Whether it was the Buddha or not, I'm not sure, but it makes it a better story. And he said that the Buddha was deep in meditation, and some guy who was very frustrated or angry with the Buddha walked up to him and was cursing at him and yelling at him. And the Buddha basically looked up and he says, I see you've brought me lots of gifts, but I don't want your gifts. They're for you to keep. I was like, that's awesome. Like, I don't need to push back. Thank you for bringing what you brought. Those are for you. And I appreciate that perspective. For me, what that's grown into is I'm okay with other people being who they need to be. And I'm also at a place of understanding that what people's frustrations or what their anger or what their sadness or what their fear or what their blame and shame is toward me, I'm not responsible for how they feel. Am I responsible for my action? Am I maybe responsible to have conversation about said experience? For me, yes, but I am absolutely not responsible for how you feel, nor am I responsible for your experience of my words or my actions. And that requires, at least as I see it, deeper, nuanced conversation from our heart, not just from our head, and to slow down and be present with each other. And in my experience, less and less of us have the time or carve the time out to be present with each other. So many things are these, sound bites. And as we become more and more influenced by phone and computer and media and those sound bites, our interactions as human become sound bite interaction. And as an example, the conversation I had with my partner this morning, that was a 2-hour conversation with no phone, no computer, no one else. There were other things that were on our to-do list of the day. And yet we also deemed that more important, that we carve time out to have this conversation, to connect with each other so that we can understand each other and so that we can understand ourselves in each other's presence.
Yeah.
That, from my experience, is becoming more and more and more rare. And the rarer that becomes, my guess is the more interesting things we're going to see happening on this planet.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think you honed in on some really interesting points there. And as you're speaking about being able to cultivate presence with another person, I think presence is also very much associated with attention. Mm-hmm. Because when you're giving someone your presence, it means you're giving them your full attention, and you're taking them in as with as much capacity as you can muster at that moment. I guess for me, that's how I would define presence, is the full experience of attention. And like you're sharing, Jator, we live in a world where, you can go and you can watch the documentaries. For people out there, if you haven't seen things like The Social Dilemma, there's a number of other ones. The way that our tech is evolving, the way that our social media is evolving, is actually conditioning us to dwindle our attention down into, like you said, tiny little sound bites. And the more you engage with social media, and if you don't have this awareness, Just watch yourself. Try and read a book. Try and sit with someone for an hour and have a difficult fucking conversation. And your mind will be squirming. Your fucking body will be squirming. Oh, I need something else. Do you know? And it's like that it's that hit of gratification. It's the novelty of it. But if we can have this curiosity, there's so much novelty to be found in relationship. We're such intricate organisms. I mean, and like you said, look, it's not for everyone, Jator. Not everyone's going to be hashing out for 2 hours and you know, going through it. You know, I would invite people to at least try it. You know, if you have something, and I think, say the way that I understand it, or my initiation into expressing myself, my needs. Do a scan of your body. Where's the tension? What's happening there? Give it a few seconds. There's something underneath. There's something unexpressed underneath. That's my experience anyway. And no, that can be the portal for people to explore these conversations, this deeper knowing of self and of other, and how we meet in the middle.
Yeah, agreed. And the piece that you said about social media and the ability to pay it, to be in attention and an awareness brings up this, for me, I love sci-fi. And recently I saw the new Dune movie, and the director of that Dune movie is the same director of the last Blade Runner. I think it's Blade Runner 2049 or whatever. Both movies to which I loved. And this director, why I appreciate him, is the movies are beautiful sets and slow paced and lots of drawn out pauses. It's not constant, just action. And what I find so interesting is, as I'm in the theater watching these movies, during these moments of breathtaking movie experience of just pause, people are flipping out their phones.
No.
To keep that going. And the critique that I've heard of these movies is that we're, because of those moments. And what makes those movies, besides, I think the Dune books are extremely deep books on consciousness and awareness and psychedelics from an old perspective. So super cool for me. And so seeing this movie come to life again and expressed in its grandeur, in this very slow, methodical pace, I think is beautiful. And I'm comfortable in that. I'm less comfortable in the constant dopamine search. I can feel that stress response that I get if I'm exposed to that. Mm-hmm. And to speak to, you know, how that then shows up in a lot of people's relating or relationship with each other, mm-hmm. is the more and more soundbite and the more and more assumptive we become, and the more and more blind to our projections we become, we will also look to unconsciously or subconsciously look to cause discord so that we can get those same responses from our neurotransmitters and our hormones. And we become addicted to those in every facet of our life, not just on the phone or just on the computer. We'll find it in our relationship. We might find ourselves feeling a sense of fatigue and subconsciously, and then initiating a fight with our partner to wake ourselves up and feel alive again. I mean, that's some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And I think that brings up, see, look, and Jator, I don't look to judge anyone in this way either. We're all on our own journey. We're all having our own experience. We all start at different places. We all finish at different places. This isn't about that, but I think from the standpoint that I'm taking and you're taking as someone who's been doing this for a long time, you're trying to help people and help yourself as well. I think that's important. We're not just here like, you know, there's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, and I know you've been very deliberate with stating this. It's like, I'm not your guru. I'm not fucking, you know, I'm not your healer. This is it's a co-creative process. This is not, you know, I don't have the answers, but look, we find techniques and we find ways of getting into the work, and that's, you know, that's how you bring someone along in that way. Obviously you're involved in it as well. And I would just, invite people, just have the awareness that what you take in and what you give attention to, that has crossover into every area of your life. I think that would just be the point that I would like to make to people. What you're giving your attention to, your attention, for me, that is your sacred gift of being, is exercising your capacity for conscious exploration. That's why we're fucking human beings and not, look, I don't like to say a lower level organism, but man, we have all the gifts. We do. You know, I love animals because there's something so simple and homely about animals. You know where they are and they're so biochemically fucking there. They don't have this, they do hold the stories in them, but not in the same way. You know, they're fucking there, you know, and that's why you can do therapy with horses and donkeys, and because they have that presence. They're there for you all day. I
love that.
But just in the sense of, this idea that attention, it's fucking sacred, and I would just love for people to just explore that a little bit.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too, brother. It's you know, my perspective over the years has become, my job is to help you help yourself. And I also have over the years found a great trust that will happen when it's supposed to. And literally last night, I got an email last night from a consult that I did, I think 2.5 years ago. How this woman still had my email and this email interaction, I have no idea, because I can't find emails apparently on Gmail. They disappear.
They do.
At least they do for me.
Yeah, they do for me as well.
And you know, we had this consult, and I remember during the consult, I brought up just some little things about what might be some underlying stories. And she was very defended, and at least how I experienced her, very defended, and never talked to her again. Yesterday, I got this email from her, and she said, you know, it's been 2 years, and I still recall our conversation, that consult. And I still recall the questions that you asked me. And I wanted to email you and apologize for how defended I was at that time. I didn't realize how defended I was. And now I realize that the real work I need to do is some of the work you were just lightly inviting me into, to just be curious about. Maybe this is a part of her challenge, is what I said. And then she said, I really want to know, are you available to do inner child work with me now? And I thought, that's so cool, man. That's happened to me probably if 10 times I can probably pull up that. There's been seeds that were dropped in a co-creative conversation. And I think a observation that I see with many coaches is that they believe that those seeds need to be planted and grown right then. And that then becomes the coach's agenda to grow the seed for the client. And then the coach deems themselves as a good or a bad coach, whether the client's seeds grow in the way that the coach deems it necessary, which then creates a very codependent parent-child relationship in my view. And so I've worked very hard over the years to allow myself to just throw some seeds and see what grows, and not take on the responsibility that it's my job to grow your seeds. It's my job. I see my job as to throw them.
I love that. I think that's perfect. And I think you're an educator of coaches. You're a coach of coaches. So you're coming from massive wealth of experience on both sides of that, with the client themselves, and then one step removed with the coach, with the client. So I think obviously you have a perspective that is, I would say, of great value for any coaches out there that are listening. That is something to consider. I think it's not your job to do the work for someone. It's your job to invite someone to do the work for themselves, and you just support them.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And that makes, I mean, for me, that makes my job much more enjoyable, because then I don't feel this constant sense of pressure that I need to change you. What I get to do as a coach is, it's my job to be present. It's my job to hear. It's my job to question. It's my job to shine lights in slightly different directions than maybe you haven't considered. And it's your job to step in the direction that you want to. I don't want to create, I'm not trying to create more Jators. I'm trying to help people help themselves live the life that they want to live, or to understand that they're living the life that they want to live and they're choosing it. And now they have a choice. Because from my perspective, there is a challenge and a benefit to remaining the same. And there's going to be challenge and benefit to changing. And our ego is very good at creating story that if I become this, I will not have the challenges that I had over here. You will still have challenges. They may be a different set of challenges. My experience is there's no escape from challenge or benefit. It's getting to a place of parenting ourselves in a very different way, and asking, maybe this wounded inner child, or this traumatized or this separated inner child, it's okay that you learn to live life like that so that you can survive. Amen. And I don't know where you found the courage and the resiliency to do so. In fact, I'm humbled by your brilliance. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to understand you and build trust with you again. In the future, maybe we'll go a different direction. In the meantime, I want to learn to understand you. I want to show up with you. I want to reparent you in a different way than you experienced yourself to be parented at that time. And as we start to build trust with each other, or those parts of self, then slowly over time, we're no longer working against each other or in conflict. We're integrating and then making more of a decision from an I place rather than these many parts of me place. And that's slow going, man. And it
needs to be.
It needs to be. And from my perspective, what any of these younger aspects of us need, the last thing on the planet that they need is another person telling them that they're doing it wrong or they need to be fixed.
Yeah.
They need, back to something that you said earlier, They need attention. They need your acknowledgement. They need your understanding. And something that I found, I typically get into something and then dive full force into it, right? So the Czech Institute, my work with JP and John McMullen, my work with Chris Kresser, each of these things, I go full bore, explore, and then sit with for a long time, and then find, maybe if I'm lucky enough to find something, I do. And these have all happened by interesting experiences. 2 years ago, I was introduced to this woman named Janet Lansbury, who does work with children through this parenting method called Rye Parenting, created by a woman called Magda Gerber, I believe, out of Romania. And so I've dove deeply into Janet's work, and her work for me is so profound as a coach, understanding the inner child. She's talking about the external child, but you can take all of those teachings and apply that to my own internal children and our external ones. And that work, I would go out on a limb here and say, if more families practice that work with themselves and their children, I would be out of a job. There would be no need.
I would probably agree with that. Yeah, where to go with that? That's, you said as well. So in what you were saying, you made a very specific, not correction, but you elucidated. So we talk about the inner child, but we have inner children. We have multiple parts. And in my understanding, parts of our developing psyche that were injured from acute traumatic stress and fractured off. And associated with that is a certain signature of nervous system function. I think in that implicit memory is what Dan Siegel calls it. The moment when the trauma happens, our nervous system has just been subject to some outside force that's completely disregarded our boundaries, our sovereignty. It's done something, it's injured us in that way, and it fractures off this part of the psyche. And they amass, and we have multiple parts of them living inside of us still. So inner children is the perfect term. And like you're saying, if we can learn to do that work with ourselves and understand other people are experiencing, they also have those inner children in them as well. And when they show up and they're expressing themselves in certain ways, like to be honest, I've seen it quite a lot recently, not necessarily with clients, but just people that I've come across, because myself and my partner run a cafe as well. So we have a lot of people coming in and out of the doors. And it's very interesting because you see the impetulant child, you see them almost having a tantrum in front of you. And you think, if that person would just acknowledge that pain, so much room for growth, so much room for greater wholeness.
Yeah. Reversion to the regression to that wounded inner child, and how that acts itself out, and then expresses behaviors that helped it survive in an environment in which it needed to survive. And there's a book I really appreciate. What's the author's name? I can't remember the author's name, but the book is called Healing the Shame That Binds. And
I'm going to write that down.
In this psychotherapist perspective, he says that there's been some research that the average human, by the time they're 7 years old, have experienced over 25,000 hours of shame.
Wow.
Those are, at minimum, those are all split off parts of self.
Mm-hmm.
And something that you spoke to that I'd like to share maybe a slightly different perspective on for us all to consider is that one of the reasons why I say, in our experience, is that if we continue to hold the perspective that someone else caused our pain, we're literally giving our power away. If we can get to a place of understanding someone else's behavior was painful and what we made it mean was the pain, was what it was, the fracturing, what we made it mean about us, whether we felt a great sense of shame about it and we hid that shame, or a continual sense of fear about it. The interesting thing about that is we all write our own stories. And so we're all writing our own stories about what any event means in our lives, which means we're authoring the meaning. Someone may, let's just say, inappropriately touch us. What that means to us and what we make that mean about us gives us our power back to then go into integrate and move through. If we continue to keep the story of someone else caused my pain, then I don't have the tools to heal it. Then I need to go to a place of, at least in my perspective, I need to go to a place eventually of forgiving this person. And for me, forgiving somebody else is an extremely arrogant place to be. Because it implies that they did something wrong, which implies then that great spirit universe and how it all functions, that there was an actual misstep, which a part of me doesn't want to say this. I don't think there can be a misstep, even though that's frustrating as fuck for a part of me. I want to say there's mistakes. I want to say this didn't happen in the right way. I want to say those things. And yet there's another part of me that says, whew, is my mind greater than that of the mind of God? And whatever God means to anyone, universe, however this all functions. Can I humble myself enough, not out of fear and shame, but out of curiosity, to understand and find eventual meaning in what occurred, which might take 60 years to get to a place of I've processed enough to understand something that I deemed as very painful and very inappropriate. And that piece, from my perspective, is often very triggering to people, because we often want to find a place of blame. Because if we can blame the outside world, it gives us the illusion of power and the illusion of arrogance, and helps us stay stuck exactly where we are. That was just a little side note that I think is important for me to remind myself of. And I think part of that then bleeds into what you and I were talking about in the beginning of why people get so triggered when we explore the past together, because we're so programmed to blame the outside world rather than not to blame self, but to explore what we created about the experience. Said in another way, is there a difference between tragedy and miracle? From my perspective, the only difference is perspective. What you make that mean. 50 people, 300 people dying in a plane crash. Is that a tragedy? Or did that happen exactly when it needed to, because the story is so big, you can't see the intricate outcome of what that leads to. You can only see this little piece down where we're at. And so if it doesn't fit our ego's agenda, values, needs, etc., we deem it as wrong. And is it? With this, this whole COVID thing, is there parts of me that are frustrated with where we're at? Fuck yes.
I hear that. Yeah, I hear that.
Yes, there are. And are there other parts of me that are super curious as to the tapestry of what's going on and where this leads that's way beyond my ability to understand or comprehend? Yes, it is. And that helps me find balance so that I don't need to become so black and white. I can become a little bit more gray and then have conversation with people that are anti-vax and have conversation with people that are pro-vax and look for the nuance and find my own way through that without having to be so black and white on something. That doesn't mean I'm not black and white on some things. I am. I'm a human being and I will take a fucking stand at times. And I also want to continue to explore things and see what's there.
There's lots that you shared there, Jator, that I want to unravel. Are you okay for time, Jator?
Yeah. What's up? Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot in there. I would like to talk about COVID and what that presents on a societal level, but I think, to be honest, that's for another day. We could talk for hours about that, and to be honest, I talk a lot about it in my own personal life, and I'll just share my own personal experience with it. I'm experiencing it as not only a loss that happened once and before, but a continual loss, and as a result, I feel myself week to week literally bouncing back and forth through the different stages of the grief cycle. I feel like I'm in perpetual grief. I've chosen as an individual not to be vaccinated because I trust my immune system. I trust my ability to be healthy, to stand here, to deal with whatever stress comes my way. I have lots of ways to deal with it. I've recovered from COVID about a year ago. Beat me up for a couple of days. Literally on the third day, I swam 2 kilometers in like 6-degree water and I cycled 15 kilometers. So that's my experience with it. And of course, that presents challenges. I'm not able to go and enjoy a meal with my family and friends inside. As cafe owners, we're not allowed to have. We can have people inside if we check their vaccine passes. I'm not willing to do that. I don't discriminate based on whether or not you've had a medical intervention, whether or not you're black or white, whether or not you're fucking green or blue. I don't give a shit. If you show up humbly, I'll give you my time. So that's just my short experience. I want to jump back into something you were sharing on there, Jator. You were talking about how I understood it was about this how do I want to share that? What words will best capture this? This not insistence, but this perpetuation of being a victim, let's say, in terms of blaming the outside world for our experience, rather than seeing in that experience, it can be a traumatic experience. It can be suffering. I've suffered major injuries in my life. I've been through excruciating physical pain, but I don't blame that. I think there's this way of viewing, let's just say, suffering. I think what's one of the first assertions that the Buddhists make? They say life is suffering. Understand that. Don't go around thinking we're not living in a fairy tale. Yes, there is potential for miracle, and love is absolutely at the root of what we can experience. But life is suffering. Let's not fucking get it wrong, because there is millions of people starving and fucking dying, but is there not beauty in the suffering? And something that comes to mind as well is this was just very recently, I heard this, Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas was in the 13th century. He was a philosopher and a friar and a theologian. And he said, the way we measure meaning in any context is based on how we perceive something, its measure of goodness, truth, and beauty. That is what we derive meaning from essentially. And if we can find, like you're sharing, if we can find some beauty in the suffering, some truth, it is fucking true because it's what's happening. Surely then there's some vehicle to understand it and take it on as this, this gift. It is a gift. Your suffering is a gift, and that was just what I was feeling as you were sharing that, because everything you explore with the way that you coach and the way that you teach and share, Jator, I think holds this gift in such a sacred way, and it all stems from that place, in my experience of what you share.
Yeah, thank you, brother. And I think sometimes my experience is that when we talk about suffering, global suffering, death, destruction, when we're talking about, at least for me, when I'm talking about, okay, also finding the meaning in it, etc., I think people think that then I automatically don't care about the suffering. And that's not what I'm saying. I care about it to the same degree that I care about the inner little boys in me that are still in suffering. It doesn't mean I ignore it. It doesn't mean that I don't want to work with it. It doesn't mean that I don't want to address it. It doesn't mean that I don't want to explore it. It doesn't mean that I don't want to process it. I do. And that's also important. It's not to say there's beauty in the suffering, so don't process all of the pain that's there too, just like we were talking about earlier around our individual. Yeah. Just like I don't do that as an individual, I don't want to do that on a global either. Mm-hmm. Do I, in my heart of hearts, believe that there will ever be a time in human experience where everyone is going to be joyous, happy, and getting all their needs met? Absolutely fucking not. It's not going to happen. No. And can we continue to work with each other as we're working with ourselves to understand, to communicate, to get nuance, to connect, to share, to learn that we can still be friends without having to agree? We can learn the beauty of agreeing to disagree. Can we process a lot of this individual challenge so that on bigger stages we can also process then, country to country challenge? Because from my experience of us as human beings, I'm just a very, 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 very small myopic expression of a much grander puzzle that's playing out on global stages. And I wonder, I'm curious, I don't know, how different we would be in terms of how we function as a world if at earlier stages we were learning a lot of the things that I've learned through the work of Janet Lansbury and Rye Parenting, of acknowledgement, of the acceptance of the spectrum of emotion, that it's okay to cry, it's okay to get angry. We need to have those things and have those things accepted as children so that we can learn how to navigate them with function and respect and care, so we can learn a high level of emotional maturity. But if we're not allowed to have those experiences, or those experiences are shamed and they're stuffed away, then our ability to emotionally express, reduce reactivity, connect, etc., is going to be reduced. And then our human to human has to have conflict. It has to have immaturity. It has to have reactivity, because there's so much unprocessed stuff in the past. And from my perspective, this happens from country to country. Imagine if this is also happening, let's just say, between the US and Japan. Now, I don't know all of history. I'm no history buff. As far as I know, we dropped a fucking atomic bomb on them. Now, why that happened, how it happened, and all the background is a lot of processing that probably needs to occur so that we can heal that big relationship. And that probably occurs from many different countries to country. And that, from my perspective, takes individuals like you and I doing that type of work in ourselves, so that we have the opportunity to share that with others.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why I do what I do, is because I know that if I can just tap a few people, then spread some seeds somewhere, those are going to grow somewhere.
Yeah, it's what came to mind is that gorgeous book, Pay It Forward. And it's so simple. It's so simple, but, and I think this comes back to actually acknowledging your personal power and what your expression, it does have effect in the world. Don't, you know, I don't care how nihilistic people are, how much people don't have faith, you still exist, and your energy and the way you express yourself to people does have an effect. So to understand that, and over time we get a sense of how we behave with people and how we choose to express ourselves, can either have a negative effect on other people, or it can have a positive effect. And if you have a small positive effect on one person and they walk away from you a little bit lighter than they came to you, they're going to go and potentially have a similar interaction again. And like you said, you're just sowing seeds, and hopefully, and even coming back to the human body, it's like small little micro adjustments in posture and form lead to larger expressions of adjustment on the grand scale. So in terms of international relations, if our personal relationships can improve, there's potential there. Obviously, look, we're taking on big collective issues, which is, I think when you scale up, things always get difficult. It's just the nature of things, you know. So look, we won't be too lofty and try and save the world. Save yourself, or try your best, and it will produce fruit, you know.
Yeah, it will produce fruit. I mean, it has in my own life, and of course I'm biased and I can only see out of my lens, and my family and my friends and how we interact with each other has changed over the years. And for me, it's changed for the more connection and understanding and acceptance of each other. And I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Jator, if I could just ask, because I know you're offering a new program very soon. Maybe you would talk a little bit about that, and just to elucidate a little bit on some of the details and who it's available to join. Because for me, Jator, you excite something in me. What you share does get that, you know, get something wanting to, it's drawing me in, you know. So, and if anyone else is experiencing that, you know, I just want them to know about potentially what you offer in terms of education, in terms of development for coaches, or just for everyday individuals that want to improve their experience.
Thank you for that, brother. Yeah, I over the years, I created my own certification, and it was kind of born out of this perspective of, well, taking a lot of education and not saying that, well, seeing that some certain things were missed, and I wanted to express what those things were for me, and help others help themselves. And my time is finite, so in creating a program, I can sow a lot more seeds in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
So the first part of the certification process is Elevate, and Elevate's a year-long program with myself and some of the coaches that work with me. And essentially we're going on a journey to address our mind, address our heart, to address our gut, to address our lifestyle, to address our nutrition, and all of those kind of maybe more kind of basic ideas. But throughout that process, we're diving into mental and emotional work the whole time. So every single module that may be, let's say nutrition as an example, looking at healing our gut, we might dive into the background of, how do you digest food the same way you digest life, and diving into that type of work. So in my experience of working with myself and working with numerous clients over the last many years, there's been some pretty big roots that stood out to me as to what I would want to address first around any program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first module is called our fear of change. So many people talk about change, but they don't talk about how there are actual parts of us that are afraid of that change process. If you imagined yourself in the city and where you live, and you were in a skyscraper, and you were at the top of that skyscraper, and you lived in the penthouse, and in that penthouse, there was glass windows all around. So you could look to the west and look down, and you'd recognize everything. You look to the south, you'd look down and recognize everything. You look to the east, everything. You'd look to the north and you'd recognize everything. That's kind of a metaphor for our experience of self. It's all familiar.
Mm.
Change as a theme is like being in that same penthouse, but waking up in the morning and you don't recognize the city that you're in.
Mm.
You look out your window and your cafe is gone. There's another cafe there. You don't run it. Two other people do. And you're like, wait, I'm confused. I'm scared. I want my old city back. I want my old perspectives back. And so we deeply dive into how do we create safety in the change process? How do we create understanding through the change process? I saw a post that you did the other day around our dream and the importance of dream and purpose, and I agree. And we also, from my perspective, we also need to ask the question, what part of us is dreaming that dream?
Mm.
Is it a part of us that's coming from a place of I'm not enough? Is it a part of us that's coming from a place I want to be more than others?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a part of us that is coming from a place of wanting to succeed and to then fail? What's the shadowiness of where that dream is coming from, and exploring that? And so we do those type of explorations throughout the whole program, as we're also learning very kind of literal healing modalities around the body that I've cultivated from the Czech Institute and the Kresser Institute. And a lot of this has, at least in terms of the health and wellness, has a lot of influence from my time at the Kresser Institute. But again, over the years, what I've learned is all of that stuff is downstream. Because if I'm in that metaphoric penthouse, I could give you all the tools in the world. I could give you the best diet in the world for you, the best supplements, the best sleep routine, the best biohacks. If you're going to implement those things or not is based on what's going on in here and what's going on in here. And if there's parts of you that are afraid to wake up in the morning and look out the window and not know who the fuck you are, you will go back to your old ways because it's familiar, it's comfortable, it's what you've always known. And it's often much, much, much more frightening to our ego parts to let go of control, because between where you are and let's just say where a part of you wants to be, there's a moment in there that you have to let go. You have to jump out of that penthouse and trust that I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I want to go find out. I know what's over here. And until, as a theme, we've had this experience enough, we will not go. We will say we want to go here, but we will hold on like a pit bull to what's over here. Even if that's lack in finances, even if that's physical abuse, even if that's dysfunctional relationships. You can see this in people that, as an easy way to look at this, I don't know the exact statistics, but people that win the lottery end up broke usually within a year or two. You won the lottery. That is looking out the window and like, holy fuck, I'm in a new city. That's so uncomfortable to me. I will blow that money in one way or another to make sure I get back to where I'm actually comfortable. So that's what we dive into all these subjects: sleep, nutrition, movement, etc. To peel that back and dive into underneath those leaves to help us really figure out and understand how we get in our own way.
Perfect. I mean, I don't know what to say because, to be honest, from my understanding and from my many years of study, this sounds like the most well integrated program I've ever heard of, to be quite honest. I
hope it is. The people who have been through it say it's, I mean, I think it's awesome. And we poured a lot of time and effort into not only creating that, but having lots of touch points with each other so that we can process and ask questions and get together. And each module is a month long. That's why I didn't want to make it a 3-month program or a weekend program, because I know that it takes a lot of time under tension and touch points and safety and security to go through that process together. Yeah.
And who can avail of this amazing opportunity?
Well, I would say anyone that's willing to spend a year with themselves. There's no, I think that's our caveat is, do you really have the time, energy, and space to dive into yourself? And that's not a big net. And we're okay. I'm okay. I don't know if my business partner's okay, but I'm okay. I'm okay having small, deep cohorts of people. I think that's where real deep work occurs. And I've seen groups with 500 people in it. I don't know the level of intimacy that you can get there.
I would be of the same mind
Yeah.
as well in that way. So the willingness needs to be there, the individual energy that they can put forth. In terms of the more practical things like the time commitment and the financial commitment, what would that look like for people to talk?
Yeah, time commitment.
I know there's going to be leak over. It's obviously deep personal work that's going to.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual course content or the course engagement, what would that look like?
I would say course content gets dripped out the first week of every month, and there's probably anywhere from 2 to 5 hours of course content each month.
Okay.
Then you have a cohort, so you'll have a group of people that you're with, and you'll meet with one of our coaches twice a month. I will personally do a Q&A and a coaching session live twice a month. We basically will have 3 weeks on of interaction and then 1 week off. That 1 week off, though, will be, I believe, is me doing a coaching session. What other time? I think that's it.
Okay. And in terms of the financial side of things,
I will leave that to my financial people.
there you go. Yeah,
because they can go.
If anyone's interested, they can find out.
Yeah. So the website is HōLHEALING.com, HOL BEING.com. That's my homepage, and then you can scroll to Elevate. Click on Elevate. You can contact through there, or you can contact our sales assistant, Erica, who will, we want to make this work. Like, of course, do I need to put food on my table and a roof over my head and provide for my family? Yes. But my ultimate goal isn't just to make money. My goal is to really share and to co-create other masters. And I know that I get to become more masterful through the vessel of facilitating and teaching. That's where I've learned the most, and I always do.
And I think something that people need to appreciate as well is there's this phenomena where if people don't pay for something, they tend not to respect it. And from my experience, I've been studying health and wellness for a number of years, and I've really honed in on what I see to be the most effective ways of bringing about improved health and wellness in all aspects of life. And I can say with confidence that anyone who does avail of this program or gets in touch and engages with what you offer, it will be of so much meaning and of so much value that, to be honest, you won't even, what is money when you can facilitate that actual transcending of who you are? I mean, come on, like, let's be honest. You can put away a few quid a week, guys. If this is something you're interested in, please do follow it up. Yeah.
Thank you for that, brother. I wholeheartedly agree. You will, if you put the time and effort in, you will be a changed person. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And this program's available to people internationally. Is this something that will be conducted online?
It's international, online for now. And we have so far we've had people from Australia, UK, Europe, US, Africa. So it's always a global community, and it's fun.
That's beautiful. So if anyone's interested, please do go ahead and check out what the amazing stuff Jator is doing. Jator, I want to thank you for being here with me today. I think we've chased everything to its conclusion. We've touched on a lot of stuff, to be honest.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you again for joining me today.
It's been fun, brother, and thank you for having me on, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now. How do I do that?